because all of them already have some experience, but it's always good to review because not only are these parts, I would say, essential for everyone regardless of the experience, but also we always change this. So even if you've done a B license course maybe 5-10 years ago or 2 years ago, there's always new things. So I'm going to open, and the PowerPoint, it has some stuff in Portuguese, but it's not, like, it's just titles. So I will read it anyways. It's not problematic. So let's start. Like I said, it's divided into 3 parts, this course, the theory, sorry. The part 1 is nothing to do with Canopy. I mean, we will talk about Canopy piloting, but it's not to do with performance or accuracy. It's only to do with emergencies, because from the moment you do your AFF up until your B license Canopy course, it's very likely you didn't have any coaching, like any like actual theory done. Of course, there's coaching, there's the A license coaching, but there's no theory that you're in a classroom learning. So when you're a student in your AFF, you are learning things that are very basic. And now you're learning things to do what you're doing now, which is to fly with other people. That's mostly what you do when you get a B license. You start to jump with more people. Not only are you falling with more people, but you're also flying your parachute with more people in the sky. So this is what we're going to learn. Some adaptation of what you know now, of your procedures in your head, are going to be adapted to work with your newfound experience. So the goals of this course are for you to better get to know your canopy, for you to better understand how to go from the opening point to the landing area, so from where you open to where you land more efficiently, and how to better improve your landing technique. So we're going to start from the ground, boarding the plane, and then we're going to go up, and we're going to go back down to the landing, and then we'll talk about canopy piloting. So, emergencies aboard the aircraft. It is rare that an emergency happens aboard the aircraft with your equipment that was not caused before, either by bad habits or by some third party interfering with your rig. As you can see in the image here, the guy is protecting his handles correctly. He has his left hand protecting the cutaway handle, his left elbow protecting the reserve handle, and his right hand is protecting the main deployment handle. Why do we do this? First, so that it doesn't come out and open one of the parachutes while we're boarding the plane. There's no consequence to that happening, but if it does happen, you're not going to jump, and it's going to be really embarrassing. Second thing is, if someone is in the boarding area to do a tandem, for instance, there's a chance they've never seen a plane in their life. So when that plane starts, the propeller, when the noise starts, when the wind starts, they might get scared and they might jump and grab something. And when they grab something in this region, they're going to grab your handles. When you're boarding, it's not a big deal, but when you are ready to jump, it can happen that someone grabs your reserve in the cutaway handles, and it has happened to me, protecting my handles like this, and a client grabbing my arms here. Because the door opens, they get scared. Sometimes the plane moves, they get scared, and they will try to grab something. And I promise you, they will grab your handles. And if they open your reserve with the door open in this position here, it's going to be really, really ugly. You will see in a second. Another thing that we need to take into consideration is when we start using camera, we need to be careful with what we do with the camera. So as you can see here, this guy is using probably the worst example of a camera mount possible in skydiving, which is very big, a big bolt. It's very snaggable. As you can see, it's already snagging on this line. And for those of you who don't know, this line is used to close the door. It's a system that closes the door. You can get stuck on this line, yes, but also if you have a snag mount, it can get stuck on more things. So when you want to use a camera, I'm not going to talk about it now, just go up to an instructor, ask them, okay? Not some random fun jumper friend, no, an instructor, usually, because they will know the rules of the drop zone, okay? Normally the drop zones will have different rules, and in our case, we don't allow anything that's not snag free, and this is not snag free, this is snag plus. Be careful when you are operating the door, of course, to not break your camera, to not get stuck. This is all pretty simple, self-explanatory, common knowledge, common sense, I would say. Now let's talk about exits. I have 2 examples here from 2 different planes. The thing is, this video, I lost it, unfortunately, but the guy basically did every emergency, like every mistake in one video only. So he opened the reserve flap, opened the main flap. So he opened the reserve flap on the top on the wing of the plane. He opened the main flap on this door sill over here. Then he slipped and fell and hit his head. So it was a really, really interesting situation. He was okay, but I lost the video. However, since we're not flying with the smaller plane anymore, we're only flying with the bigger ones, the caravans. We're gonna watch one example in a caravan, and you guys can let me know what you think. I'm gonna play the video. And as always, watching videos, there's a lot of different social media outlets that let you watch emergencies, and I think that's a very beneficial thing, especially if you're watching, for instance, this channel where they show the Friday freakout videos, because they have a very detailed description of what happened, how to prevent, etc. Some other channels, they just post the emergency and they don't write what happened. They don't write anything. So I don't recommend watching that so much, but this, where you can read what happened, it's a very good tool to learn. So this is a normal jump. See? But let's see what happens. Pew. Damn. Fuck yeah. That's how you do it. Let's look at the what, the when, the where, the why, all of that thing. So first, what happened? Pretty self-explanatory, right? He was positioning himself to jump, and he opened his main container. It's not the end of the world, but it can be. Why did this happen? It happened because he's rubbing his container against the door sill of the plane. Now, how do we prevent this from happening? There's two things that we need to do. First thing is preparation, okay? We need to plan the jump a little bit better. If this jump was planned with a little bit more discipline, they would be like, okay, let's focus on the exit because it's the most dangerous part of the jump, and let's focus on the opening and the landing. Remember guys, when you're planning a jump, there's 3 moments in the jump that are the most dangerous. Your exit, your opening, and your landing. And if you don't have a lot of time, if you have to rush the preparation of the jump, which happens, I'm not going to say it doesn't happen, it happens. But if you do rush, you need to focus at the very least on these 3 aspects. A safe exit, a safe opening, and a safe landing. Okay? And in this case, probably they prepared the jump. They were like, okay, let's do angle flying. You go here, I go there, I go there. But maybe they didn't plan the exit so well. And this is what happened as a consequence. Normally, when we want to exit, we want to put a lot of people in the plane, what do? If we have the door, I will draw the door here. This is the back of the plane, this is the front. The first person that's going to exit the plane is going to be the camera flyer. He will climb out and he will position himself right here with his parachute here. When he climbs out, he has so much space that he will do whatever he wants. He can climb out one way or the other way, doesn't matter. All that he needs to do is make sure his rig is as far away from these dangerous door sills as possible. But now it starts to get tricky. We need to put people here, 3 more. So how do we do this? Well, first we start with the people that are closer to the door sills. So this person here and this person here. And finally, in between these 2, we will put 1 or 2 more, depending on how many fit on the plane. So the sequence is from the outsides in. The last people to get out will be the people in the center of the door. And why is this? Because the people who are closer to the door sills, we want them to rotate with the container away from the door sill. So they will rotate this way. The people on this side will rotate this way. And the people in the center, it doesn't really matter. Why? They will have to touch one of these 2 guys. I mean, they don't have to, but there's a likelihood they will, accidentally. But if you're rubbing against a door, the door is not going to understand that you need to keep your container closed. But if you're rubbing your rig against your friend, I think most of you guys, if you're feeling a rig rubbing on your legs on the door to the point where it's going to open, you would rather fall and leave the guy and leave the formation and fuck the jump rather than risk having the container open. A door will not have a sensitivity to not open a container with their body, with their rigidity or whatever. So, outsides in, and the people going on the outsides, you want to rotate with your rig as far away from one of the solid door sills as possible. That's it. Now, let's say you, for some reason, fucked up an exit and you see that everybody's set up on the door. So you are, let's say, this guy over here, and you see everybody's there except for you. Now you don't have anywhere to position yourself. Some people, what I've seen before is they will, instead of climbing out, they will position themselves like this. Let's say the door still is here. They will position themselves like this, ready to jump. This, I think it's even worse, because what's going to happen is they see a little hole and they think, if I climb out, I'm going to open my container. But what if I just position myself like this and kind of jump out last minute? You're still going to rub everything against the door. And I cannot tell you how many times I've been in the plane and I see guys positioning themselves, container inside the plane, and the trajectory of the container, it's obvious that it's going to rub against the door. This is not good at all. Okay, it's not a solution. If for some reason you do see everybody set up and you didn't, the only thing you can do is either tell them to get in the plane and you position yourself. You can try to rotate the other way and hit your rig against the people, not the door sill. It might work. Usually it does work. And last case, just stay in the plane. They jump and you jump after them. You're gonna still fly. You're just gonna be a little further away from the formation. Yes, maybe, okay, I'm learning to angle fly. I wanna be tight from the exit. Okay, but one jump you're not going to be. And the next jump, you can gather everybody from the group and be like, hey guys, I just need a little bit more space on the door because it's dangerous and it's making me not feel comfortable. I've fucked up a lot of exits precisely because of that. Because I see there's no space for me to position. Everybody's like looking at me and I'm like, no, just go. People jump and I jump after them and I track or fly head down into the formation because that's what I have to do sometimes. It happens. If someone fucks up, it's going to affect everyone. And if you see someone is fucking up the setup because they didn't have the discipline to do it how it was trained, then it's going to hinder the jump. All right? Now, finally, what to do if you see this happening? If you see a container open on the door like this, it's a very tricky situation, unfortunately. It's something we don't want to do nor see. But this is correct, what the guy did. You want to pull the person out of the plane as fast as possible. At this moment, it's not possible to ask them, please get out. No, you need to really kick them out of the plane. You can talk to them afterwards. After you land, you can explain what happened, why you did that. But if you see someone with a container open, they need to get out of the plane immediately. If the door is open, the priority is to close the door if the container is still inside the plane. But if any part of the container is already outside of the plane, everything needs to get out. So if the guy is inside the plane and the container falls with a little bit outside, don't try to pull it in. No, you need to push the person out. You will not be able to pull a parachute back in the plane. You'll just make it worse. Okay? Now let's say that for some unfortunate reason, you did end up not being able to warn someone and they did get stuck on the back of the plane. It can happen really fast. See? Next thing you know it, this happens. We don't know exactly what happened because it's a very low quality video, but he had his main container open and it fell out as he was positioning himself on the door and he was left hanging on the back of the plane. Now, before we talk about fixing this and preventing this, I want you guys to keep in mind that this video you're watching is a Twin Otter. Twin Otter, if you've seen a Twin Otter in real life, it's a robust plane. It's got a big tail, strong tail, much bigger than the Caravan. It can handle this type of abuse. There's other planes that are used in skydiving that are not able to withstand this type of abuse. They cannot handle a canopy hanging on the tail like that, on the elevators. And if you rip an elevator from a plane, the plane is not controllable. It will fall. It will not be landable. There's nothing to be done, period. Maybe one ninja pilot in the world can save it, but I highly doubt it's savable. So not only is the plane going to crash, but maybe people are not going to be able to exit the plane because the plane's going to spiral down and they're just going to be stuck inside. So there's a chance you will kill everyone in the plane and maybe you will survive, because if you rip that thing off, the plane's falling and you're just flying your parachute or your reserve after you cut away. So it doesn't hurt anything to fucking touch your handles, put your hand, make sure the pin is closed. I'm not telling you to inspect your pin like a rigger. No, just put your hand there and make sure it's closed. Doing that, or you're in the plane, there's 1,000% chance there's an instructor there. Look over him, hey, everything okay with my rig back there? If you tell them, just even pointing like this is good. If you do this, every instructor will be like, okay, that's perfect. Because we will never let a student jump with doubts in his head. So it doesn't cost anything. Look over, hey, can you check real quick? The consequence is so grave that I think it's worth it to ask. And me, personally, I touch my handles, go back there, touch the reserve also, I touch everything. I like to feel that everything is safe. Now, let's talk about the eventuality of this happening. First, what do you do if you see this happening? So if you're in the plane, someone gets stuck on the back of the plane. You should orderly and quickly get out of the plane, okay? No need to push people, no need to jump over people, but you need to get out of the plane as fast as possible. There's nothing you can do to help the pilot nor to help the skydiver in question. All you need to do is get out of the plane as fast as possible. There's any chance the plane can have a huge catastrophic problem at any second. So we get out of there as fast as possible. Now, let's say you unfortunately are hanging in the back of the plane like this. What to do? As with any emergency in skydiving, the first thing we should do is to think, not to act. We should think first, okay? Even though it's a very complicated emergency situation, you're gonna have a lot of time, okay? It's not gonna be 10 seconds, it's gonna be 10 minutes probably. So you're gonna have plenty of time to solve the problem. Either the plane wing will rip and you'll be flying, free fall, you cut away, all good. Your parachute can rip and you're gonna be free, cut away, open the reserve, or you're gonna be stuck. If you are stuck, we think, what's happening? What parachute do I have attached to the plane? Is it my main or is it my reserve? Because if it's the reserve and you cut away your main and then the reserve rips, then there's nothing you can do. You're gonna be dead because you're gonna be having a ripped parachute, and as soon as you deploy the main is gonna go away. So we think, how can we tell if we have the reserve or the main attached? There's a lot of ways. The simplest will be to look at the color of the canopy. If it's a colorful canopy with blue, white, yellow, whatever, random colors, it's a main parachute. If for some reason you see it's orange, it's white, maybe yellow, it means it's a reserve. Second will be the toggles. If for some reason you can't see the canopy because your head is being pushed down by line twists or something, you can always try to feel the risers. If it's thick, rigid risers, it's the reserve. If it's your normal thin type 17 risers, it's your main. You can also look at the toggles. Red toggles means reserve. Orange, yellow, blue toggles means it's the main. You can always see by feeling, even touching on your back, you can tell. Trust me, in this situation, you will be able to look up. I promise you, the adrenaline pumping in your blood, you will be able to rip yourself free almost. After we can tell what we have, then we make a decision. If we have our main parachute, it's good. It's nice. Why? Because if you remember, you disconnect the RSL and then you cut away. If you don't disconnect the RSL, it's not going to be ideal, but it's also not going to be the end of the world probably. Now, if you have the reserve, congratulations, you've just fucked yourself up as much as possible to fuck yourself up in skydiving. Some rear wings, it's possible to slide off of them, and the pilot can try to do a yaw maneuver with the tail to slide you off. The Twin Otter is one of the examples. And I'm not sure because I don't remember reading about this. It was so many years ago that I read the report, but I think the guy was okay because of that. He was able to slide out. But there's other planes, such as the Caravan, Pilatus, you will not be able, either the parachute rips, the wing rips, or you're staying. There's no way that you're sliding out. In that situation, you're fucked. You're gonna be fucked. There's no two way around it, you're fucked. Common thing that I hear from people is you can grab the knife and try to cut yourself free. Well, good luck is my advice. It's just good luck. Because we've done in-house testing here. We've done testing with plastic knives with single edge, double edge knives, jack safety knives. We've done wrapped risers, straight risers, line, Kevlar line. We've done everything. And our conclusions were that using the best knives, and for your information, the best possible knife will be a replaceable double blade knife. Means that it's a knife where it's not like one-time use, like the plastic ones. It's supposed to be used your whole life. It's got double blades, not just one blade. So it means the blades are in this V configuration, and as things are going through the blades, it cuts everything. Whereas if it's a single blade, there's like a plastic piece here, and as you're cutting, lines will start to get in the little plastic and it will fuck up the knife. I use personally a jack safety knife or an arrow jack safety knife, which is the one on the tendons, the big one, the yellow, that's about this big. Everybody's seen it, like a J-shaped knife. I like it, and I wouldn't use anything else besides that. However, there are also good options that have double blades and are really, really sharp, really, really nice. The problem with these knives is that they are so sharp, the material is like surgical level metal, it will lose the sharpness very rapidly. It's not like a regular knife where you cut, and it's relatively sharp, but it loses the sharpness along the course of a few months. Those knives, if you cut them once, two, three, the fourth time you cut something with it, it will start losing sharpness. Unfortunately, they are made to be like surgical knives. They will lose the sharpness really quick. Because of that, I always tell people, if you have a knife in your container, don't use it to cut random things. If it's there for emergencies, for you're dead, you're almost dying and you need it. Don't like, oh, you need to cut something, okay, I'll cut it with my special safety knife. No, the knife is only to cut things in emergency situations. If you have a line over on the reserve, the knife is great for that. If someone is entangled in you and you might be able to cut yourself free because it's 1, 2, 3 lines, a knife is great for that. But to cut 4 pieces of webbing, I promise you're not going to be able to. You might cut the first piece of webbing, the second, the third, you might almost cut, but I don't think you're going to be able to cut all of them. And the worst thing that can happen is you cut 3 risers and half of the 4th, and then you lose the knife. And then you're hanging by a thread. That's even worse, I think. So also people tell me, oh, but why don't you cut on the lines? That's a good idea. However, if you're hanging from the back of a plane, it is likely that half of the lines are going to be super tension and loaded, and you'll be able to cut those, but the other half is going to be loose. And those knives, if you try to cut loose stuff, it doesn't work because it will get jammed on the loose fibers. Again, you do what you must. In that moment, only you will be able to act and respond. But my opinion and my testing is that you will not be able to cut yourself free, unfortunately, although it would be good. Maybe if you take a chainsaw, you can try. So what to do? Well, the pilot's going to have to land with you attached. It's going to be really, really fucking ugly. Either you break your legs, your arms, you're going to get hurt for sure. It's not going to be a pain-free experience. It's going to be similar to a motorcycle crash. The pilot will land on the dirt landing area, which we have a dirt runway. Some places don't, but luckily we do. It's going to be soft dirt for you. And he's going to land into the wind as slow as possible, and there's going to be an ambulance ready for you. Everything is going to be hopefully fine. But what I want you guys to learn from this... Oh, and by the way, of course, if you feel like you're going to land on the plane, you see the ground coming, protect yourself, and then you land. Hopefully you're going to be okay. But this to say that this is probably one of the worst things you can get yourself into in skydiving. Like,
is it happens
here?
Not here, anywhere.
Well, there's a video of it playing. Well, you mean someone being landed with a plane? Oh yeah. I'm gonna tell you, it has happened. People landing on the attached to the landing gear of the plane, and they survived. If you're dragging behind, it's no problem at all, almost. But yeah, it has happened. People hanging on the back of the plane, on the wheel of the plane, and the plane had to land with them there. Humans are hardcore, man. We can take a lot of abuse. So don't do it. It's so simple to prevent it. Don't do it. Okay, now let's say you jumped out of the plane, you fell, everything was okay, you open your parachute. We're going to talk a little bit about like emergencies and whatever, but it's better that you know how to identify a good canopy rather than how to identify emergencies, because if you know the canopy is good, it means everything else is not good, it means it's an emergency. So how do we check our canopy? Well, it should be big, it should be square, or rectangular rather. It should have the cells completely open. It should be free of twists. All the lines should go up, free of interruptions and twists. The slather should be down where the lines meet the risers. When you flare the canopy, it should flare. When you turn right, it goes right. When you turn left, it goes left. And if you lift both of your hands up, the canopy should fly straight. If you have all of those things, it means your parachute is beautiful, ready to fly, ready to land. Now let's talk about some considerations under canopy. We're going to look at a few examples. First things first. The canopy that is below you has priority. Okay? What does this mean? This means that if you are in your holding area and you have multiple canopies waiting to start their pattern, the canopies that are lower should have the priority to start the pattern. You should give them space because you still have some altitude to spare. They don't. They are already way lower than you. There's no way they're going to gain altitude. There's some exceptions to this, however. There are exceptions in situations where you might see a canopy above you and you let them do their thing, let them enter the pattern, and you move away from them and not them moving away from you. When is this? Well, if it's a cutaway, regardless of who the person is, if it's a very experienced or not very experienced person, we should always be careful and give them space because you don't know what happened. It might be a direct reserve, the person might be a little bit passed out, barely flying the parachute. You don't know what happened. Second thing, students in tandems. It's rare that you'll share the sky with students in tandems because they exit last and they open higher, but it can happen and you should give them space. To students, for obvious reasons, they are unpredictable, they can make a crazy turn out of nowhere. For tandems, it's kind of the same thought. Even though a tandem pilot is a very experienced canopy pilot, sometimes we give the controls to the person and we're recording a video of them and they can start spiraling out of nowhere. So just remember that students, reserves, and tandems can be unpredictable. So we give them space. We don't interfere with their piloting. Okay? But again, it will be rare that you will encounter these people flying, fortunately. Now, we should always try to keep good vertical and horizontal separation from other canopies. Now, it's easy to have horizontal separation because I'm here and the canopies are far. But if they are the same height as us, it will be a problem. Not at 3,000 feet, not at 2,000 feet, but when you start the pattern, if the canopies are at the same height as you, even though you're far away from them, you'll both want to start the pattern at the same height. So we want to have not only horizontal separation from other jumpers, but also vertical separation. And normally the stack, which is the natural separation of canopies when they open, smaller canopies fall faster, bigger canopies fall slower. We should try to respect that. Sometimes people have a big canopy, they will start to spiral down to be lower than smaller canopies, and the smaller canopies will just fly normally. This can be not so good because, yes, both canopies open at the same height. This is a small canopy, this is a big canopy. The big canopy spirals, the small canopy just flies. Eventually the small canopy is going to overtake the big canopy. And there's a likelihood you will meet on the pattern, which means that in the moment of the flight, when everybody's doing the same thing, you will be meeting, which is not good. So natural separation, the stack, we should respect it, and we should try to have horizontal and vertical separation of other jumpers. Now, if you see yourself flying towards another parachute, the common sense is to turn right. Both turn right. Perfect. Always works. However, there is a small exception to this. If your canopy is still in the snivel portion of the opening, which is when the slider is up, you're still falling, but the canopy is already kind of steerable. You can already move away from people. In this scenario, if you're moving away from a formation, so formation is here, you're tracking away and you open here, and you have a 180, and you're moving, you have a 90, and if you turn right, you will move into the formation, but if you turn left, you'll move away. Maybe it's best to move away from the formation, regardless if it's left or right, rather than turn right because it's what we're taught. Because if you're facing another canopy in the snivel moment of the opening, you can turn and face because there's no horizontal speed, there's always vertical speed that you're slowing down. Then if you turn to the right, maybe you're going to fly into more canopies, maybe the camera flyer also opening. So what we do in this situation, we keep the heading of the tracking. Doesn't matter left or right, we try to keep the heading of the tracking. However, if we are flying with horizontal speed, then yes, the common knowledge is to turn right. That's correct. If you see that you're going to collide with another parachute for some reason, you should try to spread your body as wide as possible while protecting your handles so that if you hit them, you don't get entangled. So, for instance, this is the lines of the canopy. If you hit another canopy relaxed, you will go in the lines and wrap. But if you open your legs as much as possible, protect your handles, you might hit the canopy and slide out of the canopy, which is still going to be a collision, but it's probably not going to be an entanglement, which is always beneficial. So let's take a look here. This is one example of an almost collision. And likely what happened here is they are doing the pattern, they're not paying attention to their own flight. They didn't create enough horizontal and vertical separation. And then during the pattern, when they're concentrated on the landing, not so much on the traffic around them, they had an almost collision. You'll see. As you can see, it can happen out of nowhere. Sometimes you're distracted. Look. See? Almost, huh? Horizontal and vertical separation is very, very, very important. Here's another example. This is an example of distractions. This guy's a little distracted. Boom. Shit happens. It can get ugly. So, what do we learn with this? Separation is important. Jesus Christ. This is what can happen on a collision. See? Horizontal and vertical separation is very important, but it's also important to respect the traffic around you. If everybody's landing towards south, there's no point in doing zigzags where you're going east and west, to try to land shorter. Okay? If you being too long can be a very grave consequence, then zigzagging is okay, like the guy did on the other video. The other video, the guy was zigzagging. But I don't think he necessarily needed to zigzag, because even if he overshot, it would be fine. If you're going to crash if you overshoot because you'll fly into a fence or something, then yeah, zigzag, it's fine. Sashay to lose altitude. But if you are just doing it to land closer to whatever, the center point, then it's not so good. Because Canopy behind you don't know you're going to zigzag, and they'll hit you. So on final, we are perpendicular to the rest of the jumpers, that's the priority. And we try to keep horizontal and vertical separation. Now, canopy collisions. What normally happens on a canopy collision, again, this is like standard, is this. You will have an open parachute, like this, a skydiver here, that's going to be wrapped on another parachute, and then we're going to have a skydiver hanging from all of this. So we have 3 levels. Good parachute, skydiver wrapped on a bad parachute, and then we have skydiver with a bad parachute. First things first, we need communication. That's probably going to be one of the most important things when you are having a canopy collision. Why? Imagine you are in this scenario. The standard thing to do is this guy cuts away and then opens his reserve, and then the top guy can decide if he needs to cut away or not. However, imagine you are the top guy and you have one line wrapped on your foot, and you're like, oh, I'm going to remove the line. And as you're removing this line, he cuts away. The guy below cuts away and the canopy wraps you. Not good. Now imagine that you are the guy on top with a line on your neck and you're almost dying, and the guy below you is not doing anything, not cutting away, just waiting. Also not so good. So what we need? Communication. Are you okay? I'm going to cut away. Okay. If this happens, you will be able to speak. No problem at all. You will be able to speak. If you hear, don't cut away, wait, maybe wait. But if you hear, cut away immediately, cut away, maybe you need to cut away. After that, normally what's going to happen is this bottom guy cuts away. When he cuts away, he should do it with the RSL disconnected. Because if he cuts away very fast, and then the guy on the top cuts away also, he might fall on top. It can happen. So this guy, RSL off, cut away. Reserve. And now the guy on top will have to decide. Either he can fly his parachute normally, because the parachute has no problem, and land with a canopy wrapped on his body, or he can cut away if the canopy is affecting the other canopy, his canopy. So, how to decide? Well, it's pretty simple. If the canopy is on your body and you cut away and open the reserve, maybe the reserve is not going to open because you have all of the canopy wrapping on your body. But if the canopy goes up and starts interfering with your canopy, then you take a decision to cut away. Okay? To keep in mind, never ever cut away below 1,000 feet because the canopy will not have time to open the reserve properly. You will die. You will crash into the ground. If you are having a canopy collision below 1,000 feet, both you and the person you collide with should open the reserve. Because if you have 4 canopies all fucked up open, it's better than 2. Okay? Now, outside landings. We should look with time for a landing that has these 4 characteristics. And number 1 is the most important, number 4 will be the less important. So number 1, big, a lot of space. Number 2, no obstacles. Again, similar to a lot of space. Number 3, level. If it's not level, we can always land across the gradient. Instead of landing down or up, we land across. And if possible, easy access. Even if it has obstacles, you can land in between the obstacles. As long as there's like a landing strip in between the obstacles, you can see a line, you can land there. Like in trees, or if you're landing in the vineyards, you can land in line with the vineyards. There's a lot of space. Yes, it's thin and tight, but there's still space for you to land. When we say if possible with easy access, what I mean is, let's say you open here, right here, very, very, very low. And then you're flying back, but you're only going to make it about halfway. It's better that you land close to a road or close to a house. That way, if you have a problem, you can ask for help, or you can tell the people to call Skydive Portugal to pick you up, or we will just drive up the road and catch you, pick you up. If you land in the middle of a field and you break a foot, how are we going to find you? We're going to take twice as much time. So if you're super mega far away, it's better to land near a road than to land in the middle of a field. Again, everything within reason. Don't try to be crazy and land in the roundabout because it's easier to pick up. No, everything needs to be done within reason. Now, there are 4 complicated landings, I would say. There's a 5th one, which is landing near cars, but I don't even fucking know how to... If you're attached to a car, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe in the next Canopy course we'll talk about it. All right. So these are the four horsemen of fucking crazy landings. And guys, I will play the video. Before you say anything like, "Oh, the people in the video are idiots," whatever, just remember that sometimes we make mistakes. Okay? Even though the people in the video are idiots. This guy uploaded the whole video for some reason. He could have trimmed it, but whatever. Okay, before he makes the mistake, I will try to preface by saying, maybe there's a lot of factors behind this jump that we don't know. Maybe he's jumping a canopy that's too small for him. Maybe it's the first jump on the canopy and he shouldn't be jumping in these conditions. There's a lot of maybes when we're watching a video like this. But what's the truth is the guy wants to land here. It's windy, so he's not going to make it. And he's scared maybe because there's cables and trees. But still, you can land here, 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 here. There's a lot of places to land. Even if you land into the wind slowly on top of a bush, you're not going to be hurt. If it's a very big tree, yes, you might be hurt. But I would rather land like here or here next to a bush, maybe on the road, like on top of, like near a fence. If it's that much wind into your face that you can't move, you're just coming down so slowly and vertical that it's almost no problem to land on a bush. I've done it before and it's no problem at all. I do it in base jumping a lot. I would rather land hands up into the wind, flare and land on a bush or a tree, small tree that is. If it's too big, you'll fall and break your legs. Rather than turning into the downwind and crashing. So here he sees he's not gonna make it. He's scared because there's also cables. So he makes a last minute decision. I think he wanted to zigzag into here. He could have now slowly turned there, but he didn't. But again, guys, when you're watching the video, everybody could do better, would do better, should have do better, whatever. But he crashed. It wasn't as bad as it could be, but there's been deaths last year because of tree landings. Like people landing on trees and falling from the tree and dying legitimately. So it's something we need to take into consideration. There's 2 risks when you're landing in a tree. Number 1 risk is you're getting impaled by the branches. So for that, we should flare into the tree and protect our body with our hands, and with our feet try to clear the way as we're crashing into the tree. Second thing that's risky from landing on the tree is falling from the tree. In that case, you should, when you hit the tree, when you flare, boom, you hit the tree, try to grab onto the tree and wait for help. Don't try to climb down by yourself. It's just going to be worse. All right. Moving on. Water landings. We will do the water training soon. That's good. There's a few reasons why you can land on water. When you're in a new location, you can make a mistake. You might need to land on the river or on the ocean or in the lake. If you're exiting over solid cloud cover, again, if you're jumping near big bodies of water, I don't really recommend you exit with a solid cloud cover, but you decide. Strong winds or a bad spot can happen. And if you cut away, you can also be lower than you expect, or if a plane has an emergency exit, you can be lower than you expect. Now, before we land on the water, we will have to do some preparations. The standard will be the RSL disconnected and the chest strap removed, and flying the canopy as conservatively as possible. Now, depending on the type of water you're going to have to land in, you will have to make different decisions. If I'm going to land in a river or like somewhere that might have some current, where I'm going to be able to stand up and run away out of the water, or I'm going to have to tumble out of the water because the current is strong, I will keep my helmet on, I'll keep my shoes on, I will keep everything on to protect myself. As I'm landing and being pulled by the water, while I find the handle, I can be protected. But if I'm going to land in a very big lake, in the middle of a huge lake, or in the middle of the ocean, where my goal will be to land close to maybe a boat to be safe, I will be having to float. And maybe there's 18 more people also landing on the water. So I'm not going to be the first one to be rescued. I might be the last one to be rescued. If each rescue takes 1 minute, it's going to be 18 minutes that you're going to have to wait for rescue. So, in that scenario, helmet, gloves, shoes, everything comes off. Because I want to float. I don't want to having things pulling me down. Okay? But again, it's going to be your own decision, your own call. When you have a B license, there's some things you need to decide for yourself. And these are one of them. When you go to a new drop zone, if you see that there's a water landing that's a risk, maybe talk to the experienced people that jump there that have seen water landings or have been in water landings, and they'll tell you, no, it's fine, just land and there's going to be a boat right away. In Dubai, if you land on the water, you will land and the boat's next to you, literally. However, if you do it in a drop zone where maybe the water is a little further away and they don't have such good communication with the Marine Coast Guard, maybe you're going to have to wait. So, what to do? You will half brake into the water and prepare for a hard landing, whatever. Quarter brakes, half brakes, it's fine. Why? Because if you land with a full flare, either you flare too high and you can fall backwards into the water and maybe get a little hurt and have the canopy on top of you, which is even worse. That way, if you have half brakes, there's a high likelihood that the canopy is just going to fall behind you. So, what we do, PLF into the water. Before you land, take a deep breath. And now we are going to let go of the toggles, cut away the canopy, and then remove the top of the shoulders and swim down and away from the canopy, okay? And I recommend you cut away because even though the waters might feel like they're calm, just the wind moving waves and feeding the waves into your canopy can make the canopy pull you. And if you're trying to swim away from the canopy is pulling your shoulders, it's going to be much harder. So get in the water, cut away, shoulders off, and then we're going to swim down and away from the canopy. Okay? Why down and away? Because depois eu explico-te na piscina, porque é só tu e o Lucas ainda entendem português. Swim down and away from the canopy. Be careful to have small movements to not tangle yourself up on the canopy. Try to resubmerge already far away from the canopy, that would be good. However, if you do go up into the canopy as you're trying to resubmerge, don't panic. Just find the seam, which is a stitch line of the canopy. So create an air pocket with your arm first as you're going up. You will create an air pocket. You'll be able to breathe and then follow the stitch line of the canopy to become free. And eventually, you're going to be fine. Now, let's look at power cables. Power cable is probably the worst one, huh? There's no standard for power cables. Sometimes it's electricity cables, sometimes it's telephone cables. And they have different risks. The telephone cables are not really going to shock you, but the electricity cables, depending if it's low, medium, or high tension, it can kill you on the spot. So the best is to avoid, I would say. But it can happen that you're close to them or you see them last minute. If you see the cables last minute, this close, try to go over them or under them. Try to have the canopy hit them, not your body, okay? If you can, nothing touching them, that's good. But if you can, if something will have to touch it, try to have the canopy touch it. If your body has to touch it, try to touch it with the soles of your feet. But the ideal will be to land parallel to them. Even if you have to land downwind, landing parallel to the cables, half brake to turn as slow as you can to not really wiggle the canopy over your head, and land next to the cables. But if you do need to collide with the cables, try to not touch them, try to go in between them. Anything is better than your body touching them. But if it does touch it, you'll be shocked. And then you'll have one of two options. Either your feet will be on the ground and the canopy will be hanging. In that situation, cut away and go away from the canopy because it can shock you. Or you're going to be hanging from the cables and your feet are not touching the ground. If that happens, and someone tries to help you, a farmer for instance, or a random person that sees what happened, don't let them touch you. Because if your canopy is touching the lines, the power lines, and someone touches you, you can close the circuit with the ground and you will shock both of them. It happened here in Sri Lanka. So yeah, here the guy cut away, the girl or whatever cut away, fell from the top, boom, hit the ground. Maybe she was getting shocked, we don't know, and then people went to help. And again, guys, this is probably the best example of what not to do when someone gets hurt. 2 people is enough. But nope, look what they do. 100 fucking people go to help. And you can see little sparks on where they are. Can't see them anymore. Oh wait. When people go to help, you will see little sparks. See? Kids helping. Like a child is there helping. 4-year-old child. No one's going to be able to help. All of these people just making it worse. So if you see this happening, if you're the person in charge, then yes, go help. But there's no need to gather around the person who just got hurt, okay? Let them... Jeez, look at this. Oh my God. Anyways, avoid it at all costs. Try to land parallel to them. If you have to hit them, try to have the canopy hit them, not your body. If your body has to hit them, try to hit your legs first, your soles. And don't let people touch you while you're hanging on the cables. But again, guys, avoid, okay? You wait for help that's qualified, okay? So a firefighter or a skydiver, another skydiver, they know more or less, they should know, okay? Now, aí, conhece? Conhece? We have a video courtesy of Brazil, and this is one of my favorite skydiving whatever videos. It's really, really good. I really like it. Because you can never tell where he's gonna land until the last second. And yes, that is perfect. That is perfect. No. But that is perfect. That is beautiful. I love this video. Look at this. It has everything. Like it's 100% Brazilian. Pouso na laje. Boom. So if you land on the roof, usually means you're, for some reason, not able to make it back to the drop zone. Maybe it's the wind. The priority will be to not fall from the roof. So try to grab something, a chimney, an antenna, anything, these tubes, something that you can hold on to, and if the canopy pulls you, you're gonna be safe. And then you'll feel, if the canopy is pulling you, RSL, cut away. If the canopy is not pulling you, get up, carefully collect the canopy, and wait for someone to help you, okay? There's no need to cut away if the canopy is not pulling you, because if you have a canopy connected to your body and you fall from the roof, maybe the canopy gets stuck on something and it saves you. So there's no need to cut away if it's not absolutely necessary. But again, avoiding this type of thing is the best, okay? It's the best is just to avoid landing on roofs. There's, again guys, like we said, if you look for alternative landing areas with time to spare, and when I say with time, I mean even before you take off. Go in the map, look for landing areas. It's gonna be in that you're gonna be safe 99.9% of the times, because there's not been a lot of deaths in Portugal, fortunately, but the ones that have happened, a lot of them were from outside landings. People landing outside, doing low turns, making last minute decisions, crashing and dying. So it's very serious. Every time you have to land off, consider that it's a very serious situation. I consider landing off to be more serious than a cutaway. This is one of the reasons why I have so many cutaways. I have 21 cutaways, which is a lot for 6,000 jumps. Maybe if you have 20,000 jumps, it's normal, but for 6, it's not normal. Because I would rather be flying my reserve at 2,500 feet or 2,000 feet rather than waiting until 2,000 feet to cut away because I'm trying to solve the problem. Because remember, if you're jumping a small canopy, even if you're jumping a normal canopy and you're fighting a malfunction until the last second, then you're going to have much less time to prepare a landing. Maybe you're moving away from the landing area as you're trying to fight the emergency. And then when you solve the emergency, you grab the toggles, you look down and you're off. You're no landing area, that's acceptable. And in my case, I have a tiny little parachute. So would I rather cut away and have a functioning reserve above my head at 2,000 feet and fly to the landing area and land safely in the drop zone? Or fight a crazy malfunction until the last second. When I fix it, I look down and, oh, I'm fucked. Now I'm going to have to land in the vineyards. No, so decision making needs to be done with consideration to all the aspects of your jump. Your canopy, your experience, your state of mind in that day. I've had moments where I've cut away because I'm off. There's people below me. I need time. Now, there's no chance I'm going to land in the airfield, period. I have a malfunction. Would I rather solve the malfunction and land off with a Petra and starting the pattern at 2,000 feet or starting the planning, at like 1,000 feet? Or would I rather cut away early, not be spiraling in between other canopies, and have plenty of time to look for a landing area and swoop my reserve even? What do you think is the best? Of course I would rather have more time under my reserve. I trust the reserve 100%. And if you make a proper cutaway, it's going to work 99.99999% of the times. There's never been a death from someone cutting away, stabilizing, opening the reserve, and the thing just doesn't work. It just doesn't happen. That doesn't exist. However, waiting until the last minute to cut away and then like, oh my God, I'm so low, cut away, reserve, whatever, and then getting a problem, that has happened. So having plenty of time to spare is always good. Now, turbulence. Turbulence is the invisible killer of skydivers. There is nothing you can do to stop turbulence. It will kill you. It will not ask forgiveness. The best thing we have to do with turbulence is education. We need to learn how to prevent flying in turbulence, and we need to learn how to fly in turbulence. Turbulence is affected by interferences in the laminar flow of air. So air flows in a laminar way, mostly, because of the way it's created. It's created by the Earth shaking back and forth due to the moon. It creates waves, the waves push the air, and the waves are so tiny and push the air so slowly, but there's so many of them that the wind becomes very laminar. However, as the wind passes through trees, buildings, mountains, hills, clouds, many things, it will fly in a different way. Warm air hitting cold air will create turbulence. Cold air touching the ground will warm up, go up, get cold, come back down. It will create all sorts of thermal columns, dust devils. It will create all sorts of turbulence. And if we can predict where the turbulence is going to be, when and where it's going to be, we can safely not die due to turbulence. Okay? If you're landing into strong wind and there's trees, the trees are going to block the wind, and your canopy is going to have a little fall when you're trying to land. I think my first landing off, I almost broke my foot because of that. I was landing towards some trees. I didn't expect the canopy to have any reaction, and the canopy did have a reaction. It threw me down, and I flared, and I hit the ground really hard. I'm young. I was young. Got up, cleaned my knees. But maybe if you're older, you can break something. Or if you're flying a tandem, in the future, if you become tandem masters, you can have a problem like that. I think my 10th tandem that I did my whole life, I landed off. I was landing towards buildings. You know what I did? I avoided landing towards buildings. I moved away from the road where I needed to be picked up by the van. Moved away to land in a place where I knew I had laminar airflow. The air was not interrupted by anything. Rather than landing closer to the road, into buildings, and the buildings were creating air turbulence. And you know what happened? I landed safely with 10 jumps. But some guys that had a few hundred jumps, tandems, got hurt. It's the way you make the decisions and the way you interpret the knowledge that you have about turbulence, whatever, that's going to make the difference between having a safe skydiving career and getting hurt early. Here's an example. And again, this is an extreme example, guys. Don't look at this video and be like, oh my God, I'm going to die if I fly anywhere. No, this is really, really extreme. Probably the most extreme I've seen. As you can see, there's a lot of trees everywhere. There's a lot of wind. And the wind is probably being pushed up and creating some sort of rotor effect that collapsed this guy's canopy. Boom. And you will see the outside video. You can tell what happened. Look at the guy. And this is a good friend. Went to help right away. Very good. There's no need, by the way, guys, for you to wait for your friend to crash to go help. If you see that he's going to crash, might as well start running. Wind gradient and thermal activity can also create turbulence. Okay, not just solid objects. So if a day is very warm, expect there to be more turbulence, more dust devils. If a day is looking stormy, there's a storm front, which might be cold air into warm air. It's also going to create turbulence. And finally, other canopies also create turbulence. So if you're flying behind a canopy, slightly above and behind, you can collapse. Your canopy can stall. And if you're in a landing pattern and you're flying above and behind a canopy and you're preparing for landing and you're super low, there's a chance your canopy can collapse and you can crash. So understand where turbulence is and try to avoid at all costs. That's my advice. And finally, the last slide, wing loading. Wing loading is what everybody likes. The bigger the number of your wing loading, the bigger your dick is the standard skydiving norm. The smaller your parachute, the bigger your dick. So everybody wants to downsize because everybody wants to get tiny little Petra and tiny little whatever canopy is your preferred canopy. And they want to swoop fast and they want to get all the girls. Spoiler alert, doesn't work. The guy that gets the girls is the guy that lands at the same time as the girls. So if you're swooping, you're landing first and then you go in pack and you go and do something else. But if you land at the same time as the girls flying the 150, you'll talk to them. So there's an advice. So downsizing should not be called downsizing. It should be called uploading, whatever. Because I think downsizing can be misinterpreted. You can be like, no, I'm not going to downsize. I'm going to upsize. Well, but did you increase your weight by like 10 kilos? Then it's not an upsize. It's still a downsize. It's still more wing loading. If you become fat after you stop jumping for 5 months, it's a downsize and it's a downsize and a half sometimes. So how much and when should we downsize? By this, I mean increase our wing loading. When? Well, there's so many things to take in consideration. Again, it's really not that simple. I think each person is their own, should have their own, debrief of should they downsize or not. If you ask someone that's an experienced canopy coach, they will likely be able to tell you if you should downsize or not. I'm the worst person because I never let people downsize and don't ask me, go ask someone else. But in the minimums, I would say, you should be able to land consistently standing up. Like your landing should be standing up almost always. And if I tell you to land crosswind or downwind, I'm not saying you need to land standing up crosswind or downwind, but you should be okay with it. You should be like, hey, can you land downwind next jump? Sure. If you're like, oh, downwind, wait, but maybe I'll get hurt. Then you're not ready for the canopy. You're flying even, let alone a downsize. Because it can happen on your first jump, you have to land off downwind. And then what? You're gonna die? No, you need to survive. You might scrape your knees, you might tumble, but you need to be able to flare the canopy downwind, safely put yourself on the ground with minimal injury, like some scratches. Broken legs, broken whatever, no, that's not good. So like I said, if you can land consistently standing up and you can also land with any other wind condition, then you're ready for a downsize. And how much? We recommend one size at a time. So normally canopies have a downsize of 10%, I think. I don't remember too well, but a 10%, 5 to 10% downsize is the best. So for instance, if you're going from a 220, 10% downsize will be 200. Or if you are in a 170, a 10% downsize will be more or less a 150. So it's a healthy downsize. 10% is really healthy. The smaller the canopy, the smaller the downsize. So it's still percentage, but if you're downsizing on a big canopy, 10% is okay. But if you're downsizing on a small canopy, maybe 5% is already huge. On my canopy, a 5% downsize is a catastrophic difference. It's going to be like the difference between the canopy flying super slow, what we consider super slow, to being impossible to land almost. So yeah, keep that in mind when you're downsizing. And also you should downsize in the same category of canopy. Luckily, most of the companies that make canopies, they know that people want to downsize and they want to change the platform of the canopy, or rather plan form of the canopy. So for instance, if you're going from a Navigator, which is a student canopy, into a Sabre, which is a intermediate canopy, you should be downsizing in the same size. But people know, the manufacturers, they know you're going to skip the size anyways. So instead of being like 240, 200, 220 and 200, you have Navigator 220 and then Sabre 210, which is like half a downsize. But it's still a full downsize, even more than that, because you're changing the canopy, and changing the platform of the canopy affects much more than simply making the canopy smaller. Now, one last thing about downsizing. There's some canopies that simply don't fly properly, super highly loaded and super lightly loaded, okay? This is not for you guys now, because now you guys are jumping super nice conservative canopies, but when you start jumping the crazy Yahoo canopies, it's good that you consider the ideal wing loading gap that they're made for. Some canopies have a huge wing loading gap, such as the Sabre. The Sabre is good at pretty much any wing loading, but there's some canopies that are not good at any wing loading. For instance, the JFX, the Velocity, the JVX, the Katana, these canopies are not good at any wing loading. They are good at a specific range. If you load them too much, they don't fly. If you load them too little, they don't open properly, they fly really shit. So this is to say that if you are jumping a 120 Katana, for instance, going for a 111 velocity just because you want to downsize, it doesn't make sense, because a 120 Katana is going to fly awesome at a light body weight, but a 111 velocity is not going to fly great at a light body weight. It's going to need a bigger person. So it would be better to do downsize in the Katana, for instance, and then go for a velocity, or keep going on a Navigator and then pass on to a Sabre 2, rather than just rushing and trying to downsize just because I want to change, I want a new canopy. No, just learn that canopy and then downsize. Final words when it comes to downsizing, especially if you guys ever plan on buying your own parachute. If you're overloading your main canopy, it's fine. Everybody does it. I think I've been overloading canopies, overloading from my experience, that is. It has happened maybe once or twice in my life, or maybe it hasn't. I don't think it has. But if it did happen, it's not that big of a deal. Everybody does it. Oh, you should have 300 jumps to jump this canopy, and you only have 200. Oh my God, it's the end of the world. In reality, it can be really bad, but it's not a huge. It's not the end of the world. But overloading a reserve for your experience or for the reserve's rating, it can be your death, literally. So normally people do this a lot, and I've seen this a lot, which is people are jumping, let's say, a 190. And they come up to me and they say, hey man, I want to buy my first rig. What should I buy? And I'm like, what are you jumping now? And they're like, I'm jumping a 190, but I'm thinking I want to buy a rig for like a 150, and I'll put a 170 in the rig. Which is a great idea because the rig fits one canopy bigger. So then they jump the 190, they buy the rig, and they buy a reserve that's for that rig. And what reserve they buy? Usually they buy a 150 reserve, because the rig is for a 150 main, 150 reserve. They put a 150 reserve there, and then they buy a 170 used maybe. And this is out of battery, whatever. They buy a 150 used, a 170 used, sorry. They put the 170 in the container, and voila. They downsize from the 190 to the 170, and then it's it's one size, right? But what about the reserve? The reserve is now a 150. And the reserve is 7 cells. It's F111 fabric, means it's going to fly much worse. It's going to flare less. So a person that just now downsized from a 190, maybe didn't even do all the jumps he should on a 190, is now flying with a 150 reserve. This is suicide in my opinion. And final word is about overloading reserves. The reserves have a maximum exit weight. Canopies also have a maximum exit weight, but people don't always respect it. I know my maximum exit weight for my competition canopy says there it's 60 kilos. My exit weight is 95 kilos. But if I have a problem with my main canopy, I will cut it away and open the reserve. However, if your reserve says the maximum weight allowed is 80 kilos and you're jumping 85, it means the reserve is not tested for that type of conditions. I've seen broken lines on reserves from direct reserve openings from people overloading reserves. And if you break the lines on the reserve, the lines that are going to break are going to be the A lines, the front riser lines. You're going to die. There's no other canopy to save you. There's only the reserve. If you break one A line, you're good. If you break 2, you might be good. If you break 3, you're going to be dead. So keep in mind, overloading a reserve for your experience and for its overall weight capacity is always a bad idea. All right? So this, guys, was the first part. Now we're going to make a small break. All right, guys. So now we will do the theoretical part. We will try to do it as fast as possible. It's not that complex anyways. So, to start, we will need to learn a little bit more about the forces that act on our canopies. We have 4 main forces. The most important one will be gravity, okay? Without gravity, there is no skydiving. Here, the vector is pointing a little back, but it's in reality, it's always going to be straight down. Okay, gravity only pulls you towards the earth. Now, because the canopy has a sloped shape, it will create naturally forwards movement. Okay? Because this is all moving in a fluid, which is air, it will create a low pressure area under the canopy and generate lift. The more speed you have, the more lift you will have. But also, the more air resistance you will have. So flying the canopy is a perfect balance of having the right amount of lift and the right amount of air resistance. There are 3 very important angles that you need to understand. You don't need to know the names, but it's important to understand. The angle of glide, let's say, is the actual trajectory of the canopy. Is this angle over here. It's where the canopy is flying, where it's going. If you have a streamer, is where the streamer is pointed. As you can see, there's a different angle of the canopy's actual trim, which is this angle here. It's defined by factory, and there is no way you can change it. You can change by pulling the rear risers, however, it's still not going to work. Why? Because when you're pulling the rear risers, you're actually making this shape. You're pulling the backside of the canopy down. You're reducing some of the canopy's speed, and you're changing a little bit the angle of the flight. But in reality, the trim will remain the same. The angle of incidence of the canopy will remain the same. And now the difference between the glide of the canopy and the angle of incidence, that will be your angle of attack. That's the most important angle for any air work, fluid dynamic work. Angle of attack, the most important. Higher angle of attack will mean you have more weight, higher wing loading. Lower angle of attack, less weight, less wing loading. The canopy can fly a little bit better. But again, there's some nuance to this. It's not just, oh, it's more weight, it's better, less weight, less better. No, there's nuance to it. But all in all, basically this is what it is. Now, let's talk a little bit about your flight plans. Having a plan of what you're going to do during your canopy flying is probably the most important thing into guaranteeing you're going to be flying safely. And this is what a normal canopy pattern will look like. You will have your opening, where you open or where you predict you're going to open, your playground area. Between the playground area and the holding area will be about 2,000 feet. Holding area, very important part. Then you have your pattern. 1,000, 600, 300, and landing. We need to understand that it's very important to have a plan, to understand how we can alter the plan and when we can alter the plan. Let's take a look. How do we define our plan? Well, first we need to know the direction and intensity of the wind, direction of the drop, where we think we're going to open, and based on where we think we're going to open and where we want to land, we will plan a playground area, holding area, A, B, and C points. And we need to understand that the plan can be altered during your whole jump based on traffic, landing area problems, or wind changes. Here's a few examples. You take off, you have a plan. You jump, you open the parachute. When you open the parachute, first thing you should ask yourself, am I in the right place? Am I where I think I should have been? Yes or no? Now, during our playground area, it will be the moment when you start to be able to see the windsock moving. When you're able to see the windsock moving, you'll be able to tell, are the winds the same as they were when I prepared my jump? When you're preparing your jump, you look at the windsock. Okay, the winds are very soft, but then you open the parachute and you see the winds much stronger than you thought. Wind changed. So we might need to change our landing pattern as well. During the holding area, traffic. We look for traffic. Are there canopies that might interfere with my flight? Yes or no? During the downwind leg, is the wind speed the same? How's the traffic? Because the traffic tends to increase when we're doing our landing pattern, because everybody wants to do it at the same time in the same place. When we're turning for the crosswind leg, we should think, is the plan going to be am I going to be able to follow through with the plan? Should I make my turn a little longer, or should I make it tighter in order to lose less altitude? Depends on how, again, the winds are and how your canopy is behaving in that specific day. It's something you need to make adjustment on the spot. And finally, on the final, is my landing area clear of obstacles? Am I going to make it? Is there any last minute changes that I need to take into consideration? Probably not. Then we take a nice landing. Here's an example. Let's say you have a clear space and there's no rules on the landing. You can land any direction. Let's say you started and the wind was coming from north, and then they change and the wind is actually coming from northeast. What do? We change slightly the whole landing pattern. See? We don't rotate just the final, we rotate the whole thing. Okay? The opening area is still the same, but our flying changes slightly. Instead of us doing the pattern through here, we want to fly more into our cone. See how we have this cone? We always want to be inside of it in order to guarantee that the wind does not surprise us. Okay? Now, let's say that for some reason the wind decreases drastically. What do we need to do in that situation? Well, we need to adjust our pattern for that. All of the downwind movement, we get it closer to the landing area. And all of the into the wind movements, we move it further away, because the canopy is going to move slower in downwind and faster into the wind. Our airspeed is the same, but the ground speed will change. Now, setup points are something that is very, very good. However, it can also cause problems. What's a setup point? A setup point is when you define a physical thing on the landing area, or on the drop zone, to use as a reference. For instance, I know I will be until 2,000 feet on top of the factories, maybe 1,000 feet on this roundabout, 600 feet on this intersection of the roundabout line with the landing area. And then 600 I turn, 300 I turn into the final. These are setup points because, yes, I'll be here at 2,000, here at 1,000, here at 600, and I'm using physical references on the drop zone as setup points. It's good because it's very repeatable. You can do the same jump over and over and over and over again. But it can be bad because if you go to a new drop zone, what's the setup points? Then you don't know. So yes, it's good, but it can also be problematic. If I get to a new drop zone, I can just ask for setup points. I can ask for help in the pattern, and I'm sure any instructor will help you with no problems at all. Now, during the course, we're going to try different landing patterns, okay? First things first, this is a completely normal landing pattern. Longer final, we will use if the winds are less. Why? Because we're going to have more ground speed into the wind, so we need more horizontal distance until we reach our target. Inversely, when we have more wind, we can make a shorter final and crosswind leg. And as you can see, from B to C, it's diagonal to account for the sideways movement of the canopy when there's a lot of wind. Because the canopy does move sideways, as you guys probably already know, when there's a lot of wind. So to account for that, look, we make it diagonal. Very, very important. A lot of people, they miss the landing area precisely because of this. They make the turn for the crosswind leg too late, and then the wind drags them even further than they want. And then when they turn into the final, they're too far away from the target. And in an extreme situation where the wind is just too much, you can do basically no crosswind leg. And again, this isn't a low turn like crazy. No, this is a slow turn into the wind with the canopy maintaining over our heads. Okay? And finally, making a long crosswind leg also can be helpful, especially in situations where you don't want to stay flying into the wind for too long because maybe you don't have so much space. So you want to fly crosswind leg until the last second and then make a nice slow turn, maybe even on half brakes to land. Again, remembering, it's very important that when we're doing turns that are close to the ground, the priority is to keep the canopy above our heads. Unless we are swooping or making something more extreme, but in a normal canopy piloting scenario, the most important thing is to keep the canopy above our heads, because that's where the lift always goes, up. If the canopy is sideways, the lift will be sideways and we will be falling down. Okay? Very, 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 very important. So now, we are going to talk a little bit about the first jump.